Hi and welcome to another week of the Oasis Global Gathering. I'm Nathan Jones and I'm one of the ministers at Oasis Church Waterloo. This week we've celebrated the beginning of Lent. We'll talk about the actual meaning of this a little later on, but importantly it also means that we get to eat pancakes. The Oasis Waterloo team had a Zoom pancake party where we all made pancakes at home and then rated each other on our pancake flipping skills. Now, given that being humble is one of the Oasis 9 habits that we often talk about trying to practice, I'm not going to tell you who was the best at this, but I was definitely in the top 1. Now, if you're a regular here, you'll know that we are in the middle of a series called Nevertheless, She Persisted, listening to women from Oasis Church Bath and Waterloo, telling the stories of women in the Bible. We've done this for 3 weeks, and we've got another 3 weeks ahead of us where we'll be hearing from Joe Dolby from Oasis Church Bath and Leanne Folks and finally Jill Rowe from Waterloo. But this morning we're taking a quick mid-season break. That's because last month a friend of ours, Brian McLaren, released a new book called Faith After Doubt. It is an excellent book which talks about a theme that I seem to have lots of conversations about. People will often say to me something like, well, I was brought up with a pretty straightforward black and white Christianity where there was a clear right and wrong for everything and there were pretty easy answers to any questions that I might have had. But then something happened and the easy answers didn't work anymore. What something happened could be anything from my son came out as gay, or my best friend who was a lovely person but didn't go to church, she died. Or it could be I just started to study the Bible a bit more and I realised that there were other interpretations out there. Whatever it was, something happened and that something caused me to doubt. And the more that I've explored, the more doubts I seem to have. So how do I rebuild my faith? Last summer on the Global Gathering, we did a series called Building Something Better, which touches on some of this stuff. And Brian McLaren's new book also talks about similar themes. So this morning, Brian's going to speak to us ahead of a book club that we're starting later this week. We're going to discuss the book together on Zoom over 5 consecutive Thursdays at 8 p.m. And then on the 6th week, on the 1st of April, Brian's going to join us to chat about any questions that we have for him. If you'd like to get involved with this, there's still time. Go to the link on the screen and use the code OASISChurch21 to get £3 off your copy of the book. And then email welcome@oasiswaterloo.org to sign up. Before we get to that though, there's another opportunity to join us on Saturday the 27th of February. Let's hear about our Reimagine conference from Oasis Church Waterloo's founding minister, Steve Chalk.
Reimagine the church beyond COVID. As society confronts us with daunting issues, the issues of unemployment, economic collapse, and the education impact on a generation of children and young people, the church has a huge opportunity to be part of the answer. So on Saturday from 10 till 1, I want to invite you to a special webinar where I'll be joined by a team of senior community workers from across the Oasis family for a practical and thought-provoking 3 hours aimed at equipping you and your church with the understanding, the tools and the skills to develop and deepen the transformation that you're bringing to your community. What are the challenges that will be faced by individuals and communities in a post-COVID Britain? How do we reimagine stronger, Christ-centred and more inclusive church communities? How can the church respond to the social, spiritual, economic, physical and the environmental needs of individuals and whole communities? How do we build stronger partnerships with other community groups, including schools, local government and statutory bodies, as well as develop funding streams and models of work that are sustainable for the long term? Reimagine the Church Beyond COVID, a guide to transforming communities in a post-pandemic world, takes place on Saturday the 27th of February. And tickets cost £5 and they're available now through Eventbrite and from the oasisuk.org website at oasisuk.org/Oasis Reimagine.
Thanks, Steve. Here's that sign-up link again in case you missed it. We ran this same event back in January and it was a great morning, so I really would encourage you to come along if you're free. But now it's time for Brian McLaren to speak to us.
Hi friends, I'm Brian McLaren. So happy I could be with you today. I'd like to read a few verses from the book of Proverbs, starting in chapter 1. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. For a little later in chapter 1, for waywardness kills the simple, and the complacency of fools destroys them. From Proverbs 12, fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to advice. Chapter 18, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing personal opinion. From chapter 18, there are two sides to every story. The first one to speak sounds true until you hear the other side, and they set the record straight. I've been thinking a lot about wisdom and foolishness. Obviously, with what goes on in my country politically, you can understand why that would be on my mind. But I think about how easy it is for all of us to think we're wise and actually not be so wise at all. And that is, in many ways, the backdrop for my most recent book, Faith After Doubt. In that book, I propose a four-stage model for spiritual growth, for growth in faith. And this model synthesizes a whole array of theorists, and it's never intended to be prescriptive but descriptive of a pattern that a whole lot of theorists have observed, that I've certainly observed in my whole life. And in this pattern, we start with simplicity. Simplicity is the stage of dualism: in, out, us, them, friend, enemy, safe, dangerous. And you can see why it's so important when we're children to have authority figures who say, this is good, that is bad. And you can see why it's so important for us to accept what they say, because we don't know anything. We haven't been here that long, and they have. And so in stage one, we're very oriented toward easy black and white answers, and we're very oriented toward authority figures who tell us what to do and what to believe and what to think. But eventually, many of us get to the limits of that stage. It's like the rings on a tree. We grow beyond it, and we come into a second stage that I call complexity. And this is where we say, I don't just want to believe what an authority figure tells me. I want to think this through on my own. I want to look at the evidence on my own. And so we start to ask questions, and we start to face that life isn't always black and white. There are all kinds of shades of gray and sometimes even full color. And we have to start thinking for ourselves and facing the complexities of life, searching for that deeper understanding. And many of us spend our whole lives in stage one. Many of us grow out and spend our whole lives in stage two. More and more of us, I think, are thrust even out of stage two into stage three, where we not only start learning the complexity of life, but we start critiquing so much that we were taught in stage one and stage two. We start to see that many of those authority figures, they had blind spots and biases that made them untrustworthy. And we even begin to become suspicious of our own motives and our own capacities to always figure out the right answers and even to handle the complexity of life. We start to realize that there are some complexities that are just beyond us. And that brings us to that third stage of perplexity. And many of us reach that stage, and we reach a kind of crisis. We feel that we have taken everything apart, and there's nothing left. Everything is just in pieces. We don't know how to put anything back together. We don't know how to reconstruct after the deconstruction. And we wonder what could be the unifying principle that would help us create some unified vision of life again, not just to see everything in fragments. We may even feel in stage 3 that we have begun to see through everything and there's nothing of value or meaning left. You might say it like this: in stage 1, everything is as it seems. In stage 2, everything is more complicated than it seems. In stage 3, everything is more sinister than it seems. And then we wonder if there's anything beyond. And many of us have discovered that there is a stage beyond perplexity. And in this stage, everything is more radiant than it seems. Because in stage 4, we put love at the center. We learn to see everything through eyes of love. We bring love from within ourselves to our very looking at the universe. And now we see stage 1, we see its limitations, we see its strengths. We see stage 2, the wonderful desire for learning and complexity. And we also see that there's a certain naivete there. We see stage 3, the courageous desire for truth and for justice and to face the dark sides of everything. And yet we don't see that as the whole picture. We look with a larger vision of love. You know, I've been devoted to the Bible my whole life. I love the Bible. But unfortunately, I was introduced to the Bible as if it were only a book on the level of simplicity, or maybe on the level of complexity. But now I've come to see the Bible's kind of like a library, and there's one section that's especially for people in stage 1. It's this law: what's good, what's evil, what's lawful, what's unlawful, what's clean, what's unclean. That's the stage. That's a stage 1 part of the Bible that gives us just what we need. But then we get to that next level, the level of facing life's complexities. That's where the book of Proverbs becomes so interesting. That's where all of the stories in the Hebrew scriptures that show us how complicated life can be, working out that desire to do what's right. And then there's a part of the library that actually deals with perplexity. A book like Ecclesiastes, where he feels he's seen through everything and everything is vanity. And the honesty of Ecclesiastes is so powerful. Or we see stage 3 in the prophets, who look back at all of those laws that they gave us in stage 1 and say, those laws, you can keep all those laws, you can make all those sacrifices, and it doesn't mean anything. You know, you want to know what means something? Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with God. In stage 3, there's this willingness to go back and critique, and that's what the prophets do. The prophet Nathan is willing to go to the king and say, I don't care that you're the king. You've done something terrible. You're a fraud. And he tells a story that exposes to King David his own hypocrisy. That's stage 3 work. And you say, where is stage 4? Well, I think it's when Jesus introduces us to the Great Commandment and says, what really, really matters is love. Love for God, love for your neighbor, love for yourself. And in today's world, I think we would have to add love for the earth. That, to me, is this great gift that we have from Jesus. And to me, it's so sad that so many people try to shrink it all back down to just that level of simplicity. Simplicity is beautiful, but there's a bigger simplicity. It's the simplicity of seeing the world through eyes of love. That's what I think the gospel invites us into. That's what I was trying to say in this book, Faith After Doubt. I hope each of us will be people who desire understanding, desire wisdom. We don't want to be fools. And that means for all of our lives, we'll keep widening the aperture and opening our ability to see more and more truth and to be filled with deeper and deeper love. Amen. God bless you.
Thanks, Brian. As I said earlier, this week we started Lent, a time when we think about how, in preparation for starting teaching, Jesus took himself off into the desert for 40 days. I wondered whether there were any times within that 40 days where Jesus doubted himself. We don't know much about this time. Where we read the story in the Gospels, it's covered pretty quickly. But what we do know is that by the end of that 40 days, Jesus is resolutely committed to the path that he's choosing to follow. At the end of this story, it says that the devil showed him all the kingdoms of the world and said, I could give this to you. But Jesus immediately refuses. As Brian said, there aren't that many of us who can stand that strongly in our belief all of the time. But that's okay. That's okay. We need to learn not to run away from doubt. But we also need to make sure that we don't see doubt as the end goal. There is a new faith, a new paradigm beyond our doubt. So yeah, it's the beginning of Lent. Lent is a time where we examine ourselves and we try to grow in our faith and in our commitment to Christ. Dan Chalk, who's part of the leadership team at Oasis Church Waterloo, Dan's worked on a resource which will help us as we navigate our way through the wilderness, as we work our way through our doubts over these next 6 weeks. Dan's written some reflections, and as well as that, people from our community will be sharing what spiritual disciplines or habits have helped them. And I'd encourage you to get involved. I don't know about you, but I'm much more likely to stick to something if I'm doing it in community, alongside others. But for now, we're going to pause, and we're going to listen to a poem written by Jan Richardson. Lent begins with Ash Wednesday, and for hundreds of years, Christians have marked this by making a sign of the cross from ash. Often this will be accompanied by the words, remember, from dust you came and to dust you will return. It's a symbol of repentance, but it also helps people to take stock and focus themselves on the 40 days ahead. So we're going to listen to this poem, and then we'll end with a song called Beautiful Things, which talks about the beauty, the hope that rises from the ashes. The chorus says, you make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things out of us. See you next week, and God bless you.
All those days you felt like dust, like dirt, as if all you had to do was turn your face toward the wind and be scattered to the four corners, or swept away by the smallest breath as insubstantial. Did you not know what the Holy One can do with dust? This is the day we freely say we are scorched. This is the hour we are marked by what has made it through the burning. This is the moment we ask for the blessing that lives within the ancient ashes, that makes its home inside the soil of this sacred earth. So let us be marked not for sorrow, and let us be marked not for shame. Let us be marked not for false humility or for thinking we are less than we are, but for claiming what God can do within the dust, within the dirt, within the stuff of which the world is made, and the stars that blaze in our bones, and the galaxies that spiral inside the smudge we bear.
All this pain, I wonder if I'll ever find my way. I wonder could really change at all. All this earth, could all that is lost ever be found? Could a garden come up from this ground at all? You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of the dust. Yeah, you make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of us. All around, hope is springing up from this old ground. Out of chaos, life is being found in you. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of the dust. Yeah, you make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of us.
You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of us. You make me new, you are making me new. You make me new, you are making me new.
You make beautiful things, you make